one must remember, there are no bad operators, only bad doctors. Okay, well, there are bad operators, but there are no bad 6-star operators, only weak ones. Viviana is not bad, she is quite good in certain situations. I know, you read the title, so why am I saying Viviana is not bad? Vivi has finally arrived on the global server, and the conversation around Viviana is bad has started up again. Primarily, the discussion around newer players asking the question, is she actually that bad, or is it just a meme? Because of that, I want to look at why operators are labeled bad operators, not from a kit perspective, but how opportunity cost leads to a lot of players having a much more negative impression on operators than they would have otherwise. So let's talk about it. Arknights is not a tower defense game. Arknights is a resource management game. Like in every gacha, if you are not using the power of the swipe, you're constantly thinking about how to spend your limited pools and materials, and who is worthy of getting those limited goods first. This inherent limitation on resources causes people to have a much more negative view on any operator that doesn't trigger our ape brain with the big funny numbers. If they do not solo carry the stage for me, then why even bother pulling for them or using limited resources to build them? Viviana especially is a victim of this more negative view on weaker 6 stars. A fan favorite character who finally escaped NPC jail that did not resemble how she was represented in our in-game interactions with her, mainly her giant diamond nuke. In comparison, her skill animations as a playable operator are just bland. Then there's the issue of her kit. In a game with so many characters, if you can't compete in stats, the only alternative for a character to be considered pullable or a priority is to have an interesting kit or be someone that provides a great amount of utility, and Viviana is just boring. Activate her skill, hope she procs her shield talent, and that she kills within her skill uptime, because if she doesn't, she will most assuredly die off of skill. I know, I sound very negative, but rest assured Vivi's S2 and S3 are quite good, in spite of not having anything in her kit that shreds res, but her skills are boring from a gameplay perspective. The reason boring kits are okay and are used is because, well, their damage just beats everything in the game, so it doesn't really matter if the skill does not have any type of interesting application, and it's just more damage. Combine that with the banner she debuts on being shared with Arturia, a limited 6-star who's exceptionally strong, and it is easy to see why many would be quick to call Viviana a bad operator. If you get both operators on the banner and only have enough resources to build one, of course most people are going to build a much stronger operator. That's just expected. Why waste your very limited resources on an operator that is weaker and harder to use? It's just easier to put Vivi into the plan to eventually build list and have her sit next to the wall of neglected 5-star characters. This very same problem was seen 6 months ago. Hoheak is very much memed on for being a terrible caster, when in reality she's quite serviceable but unwieldy. Her unwieldiness is a big contributor to why many clown on Hole for being just a dog water caster. She requires more of an understanding of how she works to be used effectively, but if you have a Golden Glow or Aya, why waste materials on the weaker caster, or ever learn how to integrate Hoheak into your clears? Due to the nature of gacha games and newer, stronger units always coming out, most people never get around to building these operators, and their only impression ends up being, well, they are weaker than the top meta, therefore they must be bad. And of those operators that are lucky enough to escape the E0 level 1 jail, they usually only ever get used once, and then are placed back nicely on the bench, and that's a shame. This extends to banners as well. I'm sure the phrase, "this banner's an easy skip," has come up often due to the units not being exceptionally strong, at least not strong enough to warrant wasting pulls when better units are on the way. Eben Holes on release is a good example. Many thought Eben on release was quite the weak operator due to being a mystic caster, which also meant he was harder to use since you had to play around his gimmick rather than just pressing a button that wins the stage for you. Why pull on his banner when you know Pizemka and a limited Gavial are on the horizon? He's just not worth spending the pull since there are higher value units coming out soon. This is also the fault of Global's omniscience when it comes to future banners. Our omniscience also gives us a more negative view on weaker 6 stars. Since we know the future and the relative power level of units, cuts need to be made since there are only so many pulls, especially if you are free to play or just a monthly card spender. This of course is expected to happen, in no way is it a bad thing, however it does lead to many units being undervalued, because well, they are skipped by 90% of people who are only looking for the top tier meta units. It is hard to fault anyone for thinking like that since many people will watch videos on upcoming operators to plan their pulls, So when they see an operator like Viviana play so lowly, their impressions will be a more negative one. Of course, this is reinforced by the community's sometimes jokes, sometimes not, of X person is bad, which even I'm guilty of. Since these operators are so often skipped, their perceived value by the majority of players is much lower than what their value is in reality. Opportunity cost is a very valid metric to judge operators on. You do lose a lot when you decide to bring Phantom over, let's say, a Texas Alter. But I still think a lot of the negative press some operators get is due to placing an over-importance on the opportunity cost of using some operators versus others. Silver Ash versus Moinar, Eunectes versus Horn, Vigil versus literally anyone else. Our limited resources, whether it be pools or mats, inform our decisions and our view on the relative usefulness of an operator, leading to weaker ones being constantly viewed as way worse than they actually are, and constantly clowned on due to their sometimes obtuse use cases. Now that we have talked about why people are more likely to label an operator as bad, you, my dear viewer, must be thinking, so what's the point of this video? And that is, there is beauty in these bad operators. Or better put, the cool thing about Arknights is how these bad operators are still completely usable in 99% of the game's content, even if they aren't great. I mean this in less of a you can clear all stages with 4 stars way, and more in that these bad operators will make you play in a more creative way. A new player that starts with Viviana will come to learn how to best use her since that's all they have access to. Someone that starts with Holhaek or Eunectes will probably develop a better understanding of the game since these weaker 6 stars aren't just click to skill win conditions and will develop funky strategies to overcome these operators' obtuseness. Yes, even Vigil is a usable operator. For someone who does interact with the community and only sees Vigil as a free 6-star vanguard they got, they would have learned the limits of the wolves and how to open stages with him and probably think he's fine. Not the affront to 6 stars most of the community label him as. Using these weaker or less used 6 stars in creative ways to work around problems is the beauty of Arknights. The fact that you can be creative by utilizing mechanics of the stage and using your operators as efficiently as possible to clear stages is probably as big of a reason people stay as those who stay because they love big numbers to decimate stages with. The reason I like this game so much is because you can play in such obtuse manners and still come out on top using weird creative strategies to clear stages. The lore accurate series is proof of that. It should also be said that most bad operators are not bad enough to actually deserve that label. Weaker is probably a more apt description. They all range from serviceable to good, and finding a way to use them creatively is fun, mostly if you are someone who has gotten tired of brute forcing all the stages in the game. To bring this around back to Viviana, she is good. She just needs a team. Give her someone that shreds res, a healer and a defender, and watch Viviana shine. The real difference between a good and bad operator is how much help is required from the team. Viviana needs friends to operate at max efficiency, and someone like Ling just doesn't. But that's why Arknights gives you 12 slots in your squad. No operator ever works in a vacuum, where their own power is the only thing that matters. It is a team effort. This is all to say, our omniscience and the reality of resource management leads us to rate operators way lower than they realistically should be. This lower view on operators then spreads and their usage goes down to people who have them as their waifu or husbando, who will then carry the torch of propaganda for those characters. At best, most units end up relegated to the they exist pile of operators due to their low usage and skip nature. So guys, when you hear someone is bad, the likelihood is that they are quite usable, albeit a bit clunky. Except Vigil.